Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the live Real Talk. My name is Kassim. At exactly 34 minutes per stop of the hour. Tonight, once again, we are with an amazing gentleman, the one and only Dr. Mustafa Ali from Building Resilience for Against Violence Extremism. Karibu sana daktari.
Thank you.
I don't know, the full part came when I was reading about the organization for security cooperation in Europe. So that's why I confused. sorry. Karibu sana daktari.
Thank you.
We are happy to have you here, daktari. And tonight we'll be talking about ways that the government of Kenya particularly, they have been using to combat radical extremism, because last time we talked about political and religious radicalization. And thank you so much, I must say, and thank you really so much kwa kututoa kutu, as Swahilis would say it, yeah? For removing, getting the ignorance out of us and enlightening us on what's really happening. But again, Dr. a lot that we didn't touch on last time when we were having this discussion, and that's why we need to have you here today. But before we delve into the topic, Dr. maybe BRAVE, Building Resilience Against Violence Extremism, it is a movement, as you said it, you corrected me when I said it was an organization, I said it was a movement. But when you started, when you came out, you were so vibrant, you were so visible, you're almost everywhere. We could see you, we could feel you from the ground. You've been captured in the United Nations Development, UNDP Kenya. I know you've been captured in their report. You've done quite a lot. But of late, of the past couple of months, we've not had much of BRAVE. What's happening?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for welcoming me back to your show. And I appreciate very much your kind remarks. You know, you don't have, Faisal, you don't have, for you to be doing work, you don't have to be out there. You don't have to be posting stuff on Twitter or Facebook or be on television to announce that you're doing something. BRAVE as a movement and as an initiative that came late in 2015 and really started working in 2016, was initiated. Our first, based on our plan of action, which was well thought out, was to introduce it to the Kenyan community, to the Muslim community at that time. And then the plans were to really, you know, go out publicly and tackle the violent extremist narratives head on.
Then
publicly.
Then
because their narratives, if you recall then, 2013, 14, 15,
it was something
the terrorist narratives were out there. When you talk about jihad, it's the jihad that Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram talks about. If we were talking about, just you mentioned takbir out there in the streets, you know, people will actually run and cower for looking for cover.
Sure,
and we needed to reclaim these narratives then, and to do so we had to be on television. Actually, we spent a lot of resources for paid up infomercials across the television stations.
I remember. Yes, that's what I'm saying. You were all over. We could
that's right.
Feel you,
so
we see you.
We needed to, you know, even children then, when they're talking about Al-Shabaab, you know, children used to say, hey, now Al-Shabaab ni wakali sana. In schools, and of course they are not, and their narratives that were there is that narrative of well, very much ignorance, and we'll talk about Jahiliyyah is one of the you know, meta narratives or narratives that groups like Al-Shabaab uses a lot. So we had to tackle that, and we also had to empower. We had to ensure that our imams, clerics, don't fear, start talking about this issue in mosques, because many young people were disappearing. They were being radicalized, recruited to go and join these groups in Somalia or later in Syria and Iraq. Today, work continues. In fact, tomorrow, we have an eminent team of Muslim scholars in this country that are coming to validate what we call the Brave Handbook.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the Brave Handbook is basically, this is the Brave Manual that we introduced in 2016 for training the trainers that are going to the grassroots to train imams, sheikhs, ulamas, clerics, and young leaders, youth leaders, on how to address violent extremism. So tomorrow, we are actually now upgrading this to a handbook, which is going to be a complete reference material to be used by everybody. And the committee of clerics are meeting tomorrow here in Nairobi to validate.
Is that a de-radicalization program?
No, it's not. It's not a de-radicalization tool. It is. It is, you know, de-radicalization, first of all, has got very negative connotations. You know, who do you de-radicalize? And why should I be de-radicalized if I'm, a radical?
Because we agreed that radicalization is real and it exists, it cuts across.
Well, it is real and it exists. So I'm not, there are de-radicalization programs, but many scholars have disagreed on how to even call this issue of de-radicalization. Is it de-radicalization? Is it desensitization? Is it, there's so many, but we don't want to get stuck onto the concepts and phraseology of these. This manual is a manual to educate anybody out there about extremism, radicalization into extremism and terrorism, the narratives that are being used by violent extremists, how to counter those narratives. And we don't just counter the narratives and end there. We also provide what we call alternative narratives or positive narratives. And what we are doing now actually is more of alternative narratives, providing positive narratives, because we think that we have done sufficient work to actually counter extremist narratives. And we don't want to be on the defensive mode.
All the time.
All the time. And we are countering, We now need to move on with our lives and start focusing more on the alternative and positive
You've
narratives.
actually preempted more of what I wanted to speak, but still on the activities of Brave, because you say that you are still there and very active and things are moving, things are working. By the time you were coming on board and you decided to approach this whole issue face on, hit the bulls on the eye and approach it the way it is, and go above the line in marketing, call it above the line marketing. You go take billboards and commercials across mainstream media and all that. Did you know the extent of the damage by then for as far as radicalization and extremism is concerned?
Yes, we knew. And
do you have numbers?
No, no. In terms of statistics, we did not have statistics. We don't even have statistics today. It's very difficult. So there hasn't been any evaluation or a quantitative research that establishes exactly how many Kenyan youth have been radicalized into extremism or have become. There are numbers that are given, but those are the numbers that we know.
Okay.
But this problem, it was much larger. So not everybody is captured in those. For example, amongst university students, there are 100 university students across Kenya that have joined ISIS. 100.
We'd like to talk about that. I need to know the figures from when and which year. But this and more will be coming back after this very short break. Please do not go away, because we are going to be back in a moment.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Are you finding difficulty to find us on Azam decoders? Rescan your Azam decoders and find us on channel 008. Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation. Wake up to exciting mornings every day. Active Jumatatu with Muhammad Obura. Tech Tuesday with Yusuf Farah. Wednesday, the special edition Business Chat with Ibtisam Jamal. All about your health on Healthy Thursdays with Mariam Wacharo. Aisha Khan with thorny pertinent issues every Friday on the Round Table. Fresh discussions, direct probe in Sobah Show, only on Horizon TV.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Thank you so much. Welcome. There are many ways of skinning a cat. Similarly, there are many ways of killing a rat. Some ways are effective but not efficient. Others might be efficient but not effective. Others not effective, not efficient. Yet the best ones are effective and efficient. But before we get to that part of the discussion, whereby we're going to critically look at some of the ways that the government of Kenya has been employing to deal with, or rather combat radicalization, we're still talking of Brave's existence into the game. And we understand that you have been there, and thank you so much. You do appreciate your effort, that even tomorrow, as you've reported, clerics will be meeting, right, to talk about, to approve the handbook.
To validate.
To validate
that's right.
The handbook. Thank you so much. All the best with that. But still, how then would you measure the impact of your activities and the resources that you've spent on going outside there and getting commercials and going for billboards and all that? Then how do you measure your impact?
So, Faisal, people got to know that, first of all, the non-Muslims got to know that Muslims actually do not support terrorism and violent extremism. A number of them used to think, there are still those who still think that Muslims support violent extremism. But then when we started our work, a number of them actually came to us and say, oh, we used to think that you guys actually support terrorism. In fact, we used to think you Muslims are terrorists.
So you got feedback from
No, we got feedback. They used to even ask us, what happened to you guys? Why are you fighting terrorism now? I thought you were one of them. Not just the commercials, but the work that we used to have. Okay. So we got quite a bit of that. And number two, the government of Kenya actually took notice of what the Kenyan Muslims were doing.
Wow.
And started engaging us to find better ways to address violent extremism and terrorism. Before, the government of Kenya would only look at the harder approaches, police, TPU, law enforcement. Yes. But after 2016-17, the government started working with the community. And I think it's only last week that Matiang'i was here, the Minister for Interior, and you were there, Faisal.
Yes.
And he said, now let's form a committee.
Yes.
And the Jamia Mosque, congratulations to Jamia Mosque, which has been taking a leadership in this area.
Thank
and
you so
was
much on their behalf.
Was asked to actually establish a committee, and that committee, I understand, is in place now.
Yes, it is
and soon we'll start working, engaging the government of the Republic of Kenya to address the issues of extremism and radicalization and terrorism, and we'll also address the issues of marginalization, exclusion, and perhaps some of the wrong ways the government has been engaging. Now, still, I know we're coming to that. Still on what are we doing now? Faisal, there is a lot of
not necessarily what you're doing now, but basically, how did you measure your impact despite the feedbacks that were coming in? How did you measure what grounds you've covered? And what still needs to be done? What might still need to be done?
There is a lot still to be done. We evaluated our work in the areas that we worked in, particularly in what we call the frontline counties, which were really
the borderline counties.
The borderline counties, and not just the border, including Nairobi, which is not a borderline.
It is captured in this report.
It's a frontline county.
Yes, that you worked with them. And
Yeah.
your focus was particularly on the borderland counties.
That's right.
I can mention that is Kwale County, Mandera, Garissa, Wajir.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that includes also Nairobi.
Okay.
We also covered Western Kenya,
Uh-huh.
where we started seeing elements of radicalization, which later became the reality that groups started actually recruiting in far-flung areas. So it became much more difficult to recruit in Mombasa. So then they were going to Busia. And by the time they were going to Busia, we already had gone there. And we had kind of immunized the communities there, the Muslim communities particularly, that this thing is there, is coming, is dangerous, and you need to reject it.
So just to understand,
Yeah.
there's the UNDP report that says at least 1,369 women and 1,726 youth, of which together they are totaling to 3,095, were reached through 30 community awareness meetings. Does that include the western part as well?
Yeah, that includes, I
That
don't know
you
which
worked
report you're
together with UNDP.
Yeah.
You worked together.
Yeah.
Brave actually is actually mentioned here in collaboration with National Cohesion and Integration Commission,
Right.
and building resilience against violence extremisms.
Yeah.
3,095 persons were reached.
That's right. So this is later. This is in 2018 when UNDP and other bodies actually within the United Nations system, together with the government of Japan, came when they realized actually we were doing a lot of work and we had very little resources in doing our work. And this was 2 years after we had started. So the figures that are given there is actually only 2018 figures.
Only 2018.
Only 2018 figures, and that does not include Busia, Eldoret, and other Isiolo and other places that we had started working on in 2016, 2017.
You've mentioned some of the ways that the current government and over the past 2 decades since this issue of violence, extremism and terrorism has been affecting this nation.
Right.
Some of them enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, of course the police and the anti-terrorism police unit being on the forefront with doing this. At times flagging off the suspects, isolation, enforced disappearances. These are the common ways that we have been witnessing employed by the Kenyan government. Would you term them as being effective?
No. First of all, it would have been good if there is a person from government to actually speak to some of the tactics that they use. What I can tell you, Faisal, is that there are some ways that governments have engaged and have tried to address terrorism and violent extremism that has been counterproductive. And there are many governments around the world that have been doing that. And this is one of the reasons actually when the United Nations came onto the scene, and there were a lot of issues, to do with how effective are some of those hard approaches in addressing terrorism, which in many cases were not just not working, but they were counterproductive. And this is why Brave really came onto the scene. And this is a problem that is, you can see in so many countries around the globe. The United States of America, which has been fighting in so many wars, have realized, albeit belatedly, that deploying military assets alone does not cure this problem of terrorism and violent extremism. Engaging in dialogue and talking to communities and addressing these challenges, isolate who is a terrorist, the bad guy, and there are very few, you can count them on your fingers sometimes in communities, and looking at the larger community, working with them because they're the ones who suffer most, is actually the best way to address violent extremism and terrorism. So most of the harder approaches, what we call kinetics, has actually failed. There are many wars. US is now fighting. The longest running war in the US history is in Afghanistan, 18 years.
Yes.
It's the longest
Agreed.
in the history of the United States of America, with 1 trillion, close to $1 trillion US dollars spent in Afghanistan. And the outcome today of that war is a stalemate. So there's nothing to show for that. And what has happened is that the United States of America, the Taliban, the Afghan government, and a few other, the Pakistani government, are actually on the table, back to the table, talking, negotiating, and trying to find the best way to end that war after so much damage caused. So, hard approach. There is a place for the military approach, the hard approach. It's only to isolate the really problematic people, terrorists, and there are very few, into a corner and either arrest them or put them somewhere.
That you need to agree that at times it's very difficult to identify those real culprits behind the whole...
I don't think so. I think governments are equipped with resources, with technology to identify terrorists.
And I think opening that window is the same window that they might be using, with all honesty, they might be using to suppress the Muslim community.
So
based on the notion that every terrorist is a Muslim, even if not every Muslim is a terrorist.
And that was the problem earlier on.
You're guilty until proven innocent.
That's right. And
that's what has been happening in the Muslim community.
And that has been the problem. And that notion of targeting Muslim, or the very thinking, perception or act of targeting Muslims, thinking that Muslims are terrorists without a say, not ensuring, but just saying that Muslims are terrorists and you're guilty even before your innocence is proven. That is what has been counterproductive and has made Muslim communities, and not just in Kenya, but in many countries around the world, to actually think that the global war on terror equals to global war on Islam.
On
Islamophobia. On Muslims, that's right. And so that has created what we call Islamophobia. And when we say states or countries or people are being Islamophobic, actually that is an understatement. You can fear something. But what is happening, that those people, and shame on them, those people who think that Muslims are naturally terrorists, are not just Islamophobic, but they are anti-Muslim. In the same way, one is anti-Semitic against the Jews. So it's a disease, actually, and it comes out of ignorance, out of fear, out of hatred of a community.
But it has been systemized, and that's why it's globalized.
It is systematic, and I agree with you. It's been systematized, and this is what now the West actually is also trying to fight. That the fact that this whole notion of the global war on terror has been systematized, and it's so endemic. Now they have to remove out of the minds of many Westerners in particular that Muslims are not terrorists, Muslims are not bad people. They are bad people within the Muslim community, and some of these bad people that were created within the Muslim community are as a result of Western policies, including Faisal waging wars, invading countries, and killing innocent Muslims, who then take up arms against the Westerners, and who then think, because of the ignorance that we have, whether it's in the West or East, South, North, that anybody who's Christian is anti-Islam and is Islamophobic, which is of course not the case. Yeah.
So one thing I'm getting from you is that these have been counterproductive moves by the government.
That's right.
But of course, one thing that is still not clear to me is the fact that you said the government has the machinery to tell the culprits,
Absolutely.
the actual culprits.
Absolutely.
And that was my argument, because when you open that window is where we see this Islamophobic coming, and this war, quote unquote, against Islam being coming under the guise of war on terrorism. A lot of people were ransacked and actually kept at the Kasarani.
Yeah, you see, when I say the government has the machinery to, smoke out the terrorists, I mean that they have the intelligence, they have they have the resources to do that. And so, if one person who is innocent is put out there as a terrorist, then that's very wrong, and that in itself is an affront to that person's human rights. And so there should be no reason at all for a government to actually get a wrong person and put that wrong person out there and say this person is a terrorist. Go ahead and put that person, incarcerate that person, or through the judicial process have that person incarcerated.
Oh.
It is a wrong notion. It's not. It means then that the government is not doing its work. And so we also need to believe and believe in some of these processes. When a person is actually put out there, because that there is evidence, even though it's not been taken to court. So one is arrested. The current law says that one is detained for up to an extended period of time for investigations to carry on. So that's okay. That's the law. That's the law passed by the members of parliament, and it's important that Kenya's got to be a nation that follow rules. And so if one is proven innocent, then the government has an obligation to make sure that that person is actually released and is not continue to be incarcerated. But if that person is found to be guilty, and there are people who have been found to be guilty of terrorism, then it's important that they are isolated from the rest of the community.
Interesting. Thank you so much. And we're going to hold it on that on that exact same thought, because we're going on a very short break. But please do not go away, because I can feel the heat inside this studio. I hope you are feeling the heat as well in your living room. Don't you go away. We're going to be back live. We'll talk. Remember, we have Dr. Mustafa Ali, and we are talking about ways the government has been using to combat extremism and radicalization. I'm Faisal Kassim. Please don't go away. We're going to be back in a moment.
You're watching Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Wake up to exciting mornings every day. Active Jumatatu with Muhammad Obura. Tech Tuesday with Yusuf Farah.
800 million jobs will be lost to artificial intelligence.
Wednesday, the special edition Business Chat with Ibtisam Jamal. All about your health on Healthy Thursday with Mariam Mwacharo. Aisha Khan with thorny pertinent issues every Friday on the round table. Fresh discussions, direct probe in Sabah Show, only on Horizon TV. Wake up to exciting mornings every day. Active Jumatatu with Muhammad Obura. Tech Tuesday with Yusuf Farah.
800 million jobs will be lost to artificial intelligence.
Wednesday, the special edition Business Chat with Ibtisam Jamal. All about your health on Healthy Thursday with Mariam Mwacharo. Aisha Khan with thorny pertinent issues every Friday on the round table. Fresh discussions, direct probe in Sabah Show, only on Horizon TV. Wake up to exciting mornings every day. Active Jumatatu with Muhammad.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Wow. Thank you so much, Suleiman Nachas of Tumbo. They say age is nothing but a number. So despite the young age of building resilience against violence extremism, a movement that started in 2015 of December and started operating in March of 2016.
Yes.
Karibu Sana, 3 years into the game. And we've spoken of some of the ways that the governments are combating radicalization and extremism, and we've said that they are counterproductive. So what have you done as a movement combating the same thing? What have you done? Have you approached the government and suggested alternative ways? Yeah. I know you mentioned one of the things about that's going to be approved by the clerics, right?
Yeah.
Validated, rather.
That's right.
Validated by the clerics tomorrow. So we'd like to know the content. What are some of the things that you have been doing since 2016 in advising the government on some of the ways that they are using, which are counterproductive? Because I agree with you that this enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings, if anything, then they convert people to be more radicalized and more extremists than before. And actually, people revolt in numbers.
Yeah.
So what have you done as a movement?
So other than the awareness creation, having robust counter narratives, counter messages, and of course, starting a process of engaging scholars at every level and communities. What we've done and what we are doing now, and this is new, Faisal, is we have a program, actually 2 programs that we call Deprive. Deprive stands for diminishing the prevalence of violent extremism, and
diminishing prevalence of violence extremism.
Yeah, this is a project within Brave that is going to. It has already started, and what we are doing is we have this whole concept of deep dialogue. So it's not just dialogue, but it's deep. We within communities, we try and talk, or rather we talk to mothers, to clerics, imams, teachers, and those young people that are not violent extremists, but are showing signs to be on the path of radicalization onto violent extremism. And I've actually shown signs, the early warning signs of extremism. We talk to them directly.
For the benefit of the viewers, just before you continue, what are some of those signs, if you don't mind sharing?
So some of those signs, there are many signs that one can observe, and you can say that, my child is on the path of radicalization onto violent extremism. One is, the simple stuff, children started speaking about violence or equating jihad to violence, and violence that is targeting innocent people or anyone. You know, the one that they are used to a lot is calling people kafir and saying that kafir should be violated. When your child start talking in that language, then that's a red sign that you need to start watching out. Okay. The other sign is, you know, when a youth started engaging in drugs,
really,
criminality, stealing. You know, if your child starts stealing phones and, you know, engaging in drugs, start taking drugs, getting into alcoholism, that's one of the signs. And by the way, 98.9% of those who eventually joined terrorist groups have engaged in this behavior. Drug addiction, criminality, even prostitution. These are early warning signs. Don't think that those people the vast majority of people who joined Al-Shabaab, you know, religious. Muslims or no, they're not. No, vast majority.
Clerics.
Maybe 0.01% might be religious, but majority of them are not.
That's proven. The figures you're giving me are proven.
It's proven. You can take that
substantiated.
To the bank. Absolutely.
Any documentation, any reference?
No, there are researches I can share with you. There's a research done in 2014 by Network of Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. There's another research done, launched 2 weeks ago by the Network of Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. There's another research that we launched in Brussels 3 weeks ago. Not 3 weeks ago, sorry. About 5 weeks ago,
Brussels,
and we are talking about from criminality to jihad. The title of that research actually is From Criminality to Jihad. And what happened? And you know, they looked at those who have joined ISIS, Al-Qaeda from London, from Leicester, from Birmingham, from Brussels, Paris, and all the other cities. And the reason why that research is titled From Criminality to Jihad is because in some of the cases, by the way, 100% of those young people that have joined ISIS started off as criminals. 100%.
So from criminality to jihad, straight away.
That's right. So if you find, you know, these gangs, the superpower, Wakali Wao, Wakali Kwanza, that's the first stage. And majority of them, believe you me, those who end up joining Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram in the case of Nigeria, petty thieves, you know, young people starting to, you know, cheat around, lie around and steal. Then they graduate into the heavier doses of criminality before they join these groups. So these are just some of the few. So it's not you know, Faisal has a beard, because this is exactly what used to happen.
That's exactly what the
authorities you have a prayer mark here, you have a beard, and some of these, you know, a person like you would be stereotyped, not even profiled. I have no problem anybody profiling me. Let anybody profile me. I mean, profiling is okay. It's but stereotyping, and you know, sometimes most law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies around the world, they stereotype you instead of profiling you. And when they stereotype you, oh, you pray a lot, you have beard, this one might be a potential terrorist. That's where they go wrong. The terrorists are found in the streets, in the back streets.
Have you shared this information? That's what I'm asking. As Brave, what exactly have you done with the authorities in combating this and addressing these counterproductive measures the police have been going about all these years?
They know it. They know it.
I don't think so.
No, they do. Faisal, the government knows it. And this is why, you know, now, in the last few years, you know, the people who are really apprehended are actually the criminals who have been in this game for a very long time. And the other thing, and this is important for families, Faisal, most of those people who have been apprehended and have joined Al-Shabaab or have been arrested, they come from single mother families. So the father is absent in those homes. And this I can, you know, the research for this is there. You can find, we can give you some. We ourselves have done some. So the absence of the father in a family is very dangerous. And when we talk to imams, clerics, we ask them to really focus on the essence of families as a counter violent extremism plan.
Before I interrupted you, you were talking on some of the counter alternative ways to
Yes.
counter violence extremism, and you're talking of counter narratives, and you're explaining deprive on
Yeah.
some of the signs, and that's why I interrupted
That's
you to tell
right.
me more
Yeah, yeah.
some of the early signs. Please
No,
proceed.
it's not an interruption. It's all what we are talking about. You know, when you're talking about deprive, when you're talking about, there are many programs. There's one called SWAV. There's another program called SHARE that checks against radicalization and extremism. There is a SWAV, systematic deployment or other engagement of sheikhs against violent extremism. So, for example, the deep dialogue is when a child shows signs of radicalization into extremism, of course, then we get to know about that. Then we start talking to that child or young person, and if we feel that this child has been visiting or is actually falling prey to the narratives from groups such as Al-Shabaab, then we talk that child through what he or she is reading, his or her understanding of Islam, and our own clerics that have actually been the ones that are developing this brave manual. And tomorrow we are validating the second version, which is now a handbook, a complete reference tool. They talk to these boys and girls and try and correct the misinterpretation or misperception that they have about Islam. For example, jihad. Many people think that there's jihad in Syria and
Somalia and Nigeria,
or Nigeria
and Afghanistan.
And they truly believe there's jihad because the narratives from Al-Shabaab or ISIS or the others has been so powerful today, not as much as it used to be in 2015.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I was doing my research for this show, and that's why we had to talk about this today. Some of the things that are being said by these people, these quote-unquote clerics, who are talking to the young men and the Muslim community in general out there, they're so convincing, super convincing, and they would bash you with ayats, verses from the Holy Quran and hadith all over. They would seriously select them, and it just creates a perfect picture.
Yeah, and
if someone would tell you today,
Faisal, you are right, absolutely. They've done their homework.
Very, very well.
That's right.
Very well. If someone would tell you today, do not dare support the Constitution of Kenya,
yes,
and then he goes around and picks some verses from the Holy Quran,
and we'll get plenty
don't
of
support
verses.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
And he would give you some actual, tangible, some practical, something that you can relate with.
Yes.
This is a message I can quote this cleric in a message that he said a couple of years ago, and he died a couple of years ago as well. When the referendum of this new constitution, the campaigns were ongoing, and then he discouraged people again taking part in this. And he told people that some of the people who are now advocating for this new constitution, years to come, they'll be on the front line wishing that this constitution to be amended and to be changed just to favor them. And I mean, what we're saying, so they've done their homework so well. Yeah. So their power of convincing is on another level.
That's right.
So how do you come up with counter narratives for this to add?
It's a whole of, there's a lot of deception, first of all. And before you realize that deception that comes with those narratives, sometimes it's too late. There are many young people that have joined terrorist groups because of this deception. When they reach there, they found out that they have been deceived. Now, there are 8, and we've done our homework, we've done our research. There are 8 what we would call the meta-narratives, the totalizing, yes, overarching story, if you like, or explanation that these narratives fit in. And they use those 8 meta-narratives to actually lie to, deceive, and convince many young people, especially, particularly the ignorant, to join their ranks and file. And many narratives emanate out of those globalized meta-narratives. One, and allow me to go through some of them, maybe not 8 because we don't have enough time. One is the concept of, we talked about, first of all, these meta-narratives, one is takfirism, the second is jihad, The third is Jahiliya, the concept of Jahiliya. The fourth is a concept called Hakimiyya. Fifth is Tamkin. Then there is the meta-narrative of Al-Wala wal-Bara. And then there is another meta-narrative of Darul Harb and Darul Islam. And the meta-narrative of Khilafah. So this, within those 8 meta-narratives, they have the narratives coming out of them. And when they deploy those meta-narratives, they sound very convincing. For example, when people talk about takfirism, takfirism is, the action of, labeling another Muslim as a kafir or non-Muslim. And they deploy that, and they go to the Quran and quote verses from the Quran on why takfirism should be deployed on a person. And when they do that, then the one is expected that person maybe should be slaughtered because that's, that person has left the fold of Islam. And so when they do that, they also tell a young person or the person who's listening to this narrative, if you don't carry out this action as commanded by Allah, they would say, you will go to hell, you will not go to Jannah. So once, an ignorant person says, if I don't call somebody a kafir or a non-Muslim, and previously was a Muslim, and if I don't kill him, then I will go to hell, and doesn't want to go to hell. So, and a good person, a good Muslim wouldn't kill, because a good Muslim will know that if you kill one soul, it's as if you've killed the whole humanity. And if you save one soul, it's as though you've saved the whole humanity. Sure. So one started asking questions, and getting really confused. These guys are saying this, and they're quoting from the same source, the Quran and Hadith. But this is what I've learned, this is not the way. And that confusion then is elevated into something else. So they'll come with the meta-narrative of Jahiliya or Tamkin or Hakimiyya. And then the last bit, is the meta-narrative of Khilafah. That all the problems Muslims are facing today is because we do not have a caliphate. That to solve the problems that Muslims are facing today, we must have what we call a super state. So you see, that automatically sucks people. Those who don't want to kill, in their in their hoods, they go to Somalia or go to Syria,
to
Iraq,
kill there,
to go and kill there, or to go and get training there. So it's very confusing. But what we have to do now is and what we've done, what Brave has done, is we've isolated those 8 meta-narratives. And we've isolated about, within each meta-narrative, well, they vary in numbers. We've isolated about 200 plus narratives. And each one of those coming from Al-Shabaab, ISIS, we have developed a counter-narrative and an alternative narrative.
Interesting. Because of time, just going to rush quite fast. There is an article by the European Institute of Peace, and I'm glad some of the things that are mentioned here, you're actually implementing them. I mean, they've traversed the world and looked at some of the best practices in the world, and some of the practices that are working, of course. And there is this one from Denmark, known as the Aarhus model. The Aarhus model, where what they're basically doing is they're focusing on community trust. They build their trust within the community. They have a lot of communal counseling, psychological counseling, and one-to-one counseling.
That's right.
Communal and one-to-one counseling with those particular. And this has actually bore fruits, because from their data in 2013, they had 31 individuals from Denmark joining ISIS. 2014, guess what? Only 1.
Yep.
And 2015, only 3. Yep. So it is something that you can see from the figures, the ones that are documented. It's something that's really working. And of course, in Michelin as well, community policing and community dialogue as well. This is something that's really working. Yep. And you've started that as well in the country.
Yep.
Are you doing it as Brave alone, or you are incorporating and integrating other functions, other stakeholders?
Well, Brave is a movement, so anybody can join Brave. And what we are doing, actually, Denmark is one of the countries that from very early on recognized this problem of extremism, and started community-based approaches that have proven to be very successful. And trust, as you mentioned, is one of those. If you don't build trust, between communities and governments, between communities, intra-faith, that is within Islam.
Within Islam.
So there are so many groups, Sufi, Salafi, so Shia, Sunni, and then interfaith, Muslims and Christians. If you don't create trust at various levels, then what you have is a dysfunctional society that even will not care when we have terrorists within their midst. And so in Denmark, in Oman is one of the other countries that have done extremely well. Singapore's done extremely. Let me tell you something. In Oman, the head of counter-terrorism there plays football with former Guantanamo detainees today. Yes, they play football together. We'll talk about that next week, maybe, if we have more time.
Amnesty. The government has offered amnesty to the returnees from some of these fronts.
Yes.
Talk of ISIS, talk of Al-Qaeda, talk of Al-Shabaab. But again, how many of those are being affected?
When it comes to amnesty, first of all, in Kenya here, this whole issue of amnesty, the current framework, well, there is no framework for amnesty in Kenya. It's a political pronouncement. So there is no legal or legislation that focuses or that addresses amnesty. And by the way, the 2010 Kenyan Constitution clearly states how an amnesty, or rather the frameworks for any amnesty, it's got to be legislated through Parliament. And this is something I believe, and we've asked the government to work on, because without that framework, then some of the work that we are doing won't go as far as we would want the work to go, and will not be as effective as we would like those work to go. And the committee that has been set up by Jamia Mosque on behalf of the Kenyan Muslims, this should be the first agenda on the table.
Amnesty.
Yeah. So the amnesty is there, but what is required is how that amnesty should be executed. So that should be the first.
And Brave is there as well.
Brave is there, and which is a very good thing. Again, thanks to Jamia Mosque. So the first thing that we should go and ask Fred Matiang'i is, or rather advise or discuss, is how can we frame this amnesty? How can we have it as what kind of a framework do we need so that we move very fast? We want to prevent extremism and terrorism, and we want to dry up the pools from which the terrorists would otherwise come and recruit from.
In 2018, 2 returnees came back and they actually disappeared in thin air.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to be under the amnesty program.
Yeah. So it's very difficult to tell where did they disappear to, because there is no framework. And so this is really the responsibility of the Kenyan government. Let us have this framework in place, because then when you have a framework, it becomes very easy.
Let's talk about the book, Secretary.
Yeah. Well, some of this is the Brave manual. I told you tomorrow we are now upgrading this into a Brave handbook.
Yeah.
And we have clerics who are going to meet and are going to validate that manual, and then we will start rolling it out across the country.
In what language?
It's going to be in English.
English.
Yeah.
This looks like
this is in Kiswahili.
Oh.
We have an English version, but the handbook is also going to be translated into Kiswahili. So that those sheikhs that are well versed with English will use that. Those that are well versed with Kiswahili will also use the Kiswahili.
The handbook,
version.
where can they be found?
The handbook will be, well, that will be only for training in the first 6 months.
Training.
Yeah, it's only for training. But this one is found. This manual is actually found at Brave offices on Riverside Drive, and anybody can have access to.
Any libraries apart from the offices?
No, we don't stock this in libraries, unfortunately, because it's a tool.
Oh.
You need to be trained on it to be able to
use the
use
handbook.
The handbook will be kind of both training and resource. So we will send a few copies to the Jamia library here, and any other person who will request for that, provided they have a program to train and address violent extremism.
If I want to be trained, how do I go about it?
Oh yeah, please, we will start organizing those trainings. And for people like yourselves who are very busy, I think we should have an executive course for training to address
Look who's
violent
talking. Come on,
extremism.
Daktari. Come on, Daktari.
That's right. That's true, Faisal. Then we have, besides that, we are constantly doing research, updating our knowledge. So we have 2 books here, The Changing Dynamics of Terrorism. One is book 1, volume 1, The Changing Dynamics of Terrorism and Violent Extremism. That's an analysis.
Volume 1.
Yeah, that's volume 1. And what we realize is that very few people, including governments, by the way, have very little understanding about violent extremism and radicalization. There's one scholar who once said, a problem well-defined is a problem half solved. So we started with this book here to understand the problem. So this is an analysis. And then here is volume 2, is policy and practice. After understanding the problem of extremism, what is it that we need to do policy-wise and as practitioners to address violent extremism? So this is the second volume.
Are these for sale or are these mine?
These ones are for sale. I'm gonna give you free of charge.
You're gonna give it to me?
Yeah, because you're giving me a lot of airtime today to advertise my books on. And
Amen.
this is a general book on globalization of terrorism. These I've been writing for a very long time, and I look at terrorism from an African perspective. A lot of debate out there and knowledge and writings about terrorism is very Western centric. Is about the British, American, the West, telling us what terrorism is. But here I tell terrorism from an African perspective and how we should be dealing with this problem of terrorism.
African problem, African solutions.
That's right.
Daktari, come on. You know I cannot take it without his autographers. Of course,
Yes, so
Daktari. Please.
Faisal, let's autograph this for you.
Tafadhali. Straight from the author, man.
So today is fast, isn't it?
Today is fast.
November.
Of November. Alhamdulillah, November. Ay, telling you, a month of blessings. Someone said 2019 is my year. Shaking the president's hands, interacting with such a big man on the set twice. My goodness.
Now, and then we will start organizing trainings for very busy people like you, so that you can also go and help the young. Or when you are here, you will be our ambassadors and educate the community, create more awareness about this problem of radicalization into extremism. And by the way, you realize I normally say radicalization into extremism,
yes,
because radicalization in itself is not a bad thing. And I don't want to confuse viewers. We will talk about that later.
Please.
It is when it becomes violent and it moves to extremism.
That's when it becomes bad.
That's when it becomes.
Thank you.
Terrible.
Daktari, your parting shot.
I want to encourage Kenyans, and particularly Muslims. We got to approach the challenges that are facing us from an evidence perspective, a point of view. Let us understand our problems. Let us analyze our problems, and not just focus on perceptions, assumptions, and stereotypes. Let us understand our problems, and only in understanding our problems, or after understanding our problems, will we be able to resolve them.
Wow. Thanks so much, Daktari. Very strong ones. And guys, that's how we wrap it up. But before that, our ticket to slumber. I'm borrowing from my mom a great lesson. This is a pen. And this is a pen. This is the same pen. And so is this. But different angles, of course. What does it tell? Perspectives. Perspectives. In the second segment, we say that there are many ways of killing a rat. Some might be effective and efficient. Others might be effective, not efficient. Others not efficient, but effective. Others not efficient, not effective at all. Similarly, in life, you'll meet a lot of people who do their things in a lot of ways. Not necessarily the way that you understand might be right. It all narrows down back to perspective. Right at some point can be relative, and so is wrong, of course, based on the code of conduct and the ethics that that encapsulates you, that you build yourself around. What I'm trying to say is that let's learn the art of accommodating each other and know that your way is not necessarily the way and the right way. So that has been the ticket to the Slumberland, and my name is Faisal Kassim. Thank you so much for being with us for that all hour. See you next week, simply same time.